Change. Something many strive for. Yet, if you think about it, it's kind of incredible just how much we can change. When I think of myself 2, 3, 4 years ago, it's like looking at a totally different person. Just about halfway past my turning 20, for me it should come as no surprise. Those especially formative years are still shaping me, though it seems I'm beginning to harden up a bit. I've always been an artistically minded individual, one whose aspirations were shaped by that which I consumed, the key through line being their creative nature. Calvin and Hobbes had my first aspirations as a professional comic artist, Sonic the Hedgehog my dreams of game design, Disney Saturday mornings, and early YouTube my interest in animation. And it just so happens that my discovery of anime coincided with the most recent pivotal period of my life thus far. At the present, I feel like I'm on the cusp of a new chapter in my life. I'm closing on old interests and issues, and moving forward in pursuit of something that I think will better reflect who I truly am. For now, anyway. With that said, it feels appropriate to take a step back and reflect on how I've ended up where, and who, I am in the first place. Mournful and melancholic tales have drawn my interest even from a younger age. Action never had that allure that it seems to for most young boys as I had been. Though that's not to say I didn't consume it anyways, necessitated by an eager desire to consume as much animated media as physically possible, a medium I seem to identify with more than actual people. I fell into the more mellow, less talkative type. Even according to my mother, I was a shockingly quiet baby, in stark contrast to my loud, and later outgoing, older sister. As we grew, our opposing character traits too would only grow further. Her extroversion versus my introversion, and her love for cheerful and happy versus mine for somber and quote-unquote depressing anime movies. It's not to say I don't enjoy fun, as I definitely do. Though more recently in particular, I've come to wholeheartedly embrace the pure joy of pure joy. But alongside that, I hold in equally high regard those that don't have the ever after. Sadness sticks with me, but not in a bad way. The release of emotions, of tears, is an intensely cathartic experience. An art that manages to lodge itself deep inside your heart and mind is by that very nature the kind that gets you thinking. So it's no exaggeration to say that when I watched Grave of the Fireflies, I bawled like a child. In many senses of the word, I suppose I still was one. More importantly than the tears, though, was the sniffling self-contemplation after. The movie took me outside of myself, woke me up to what I'd been too preoccupied, with nothing important at that, to notice. Part 1 in my shift of perception towards the world around me. Grave of the Fireflies is a film following siblings Seita and Setsuko at the apex of World War II. The introductory shot showing Seita's pitiful death, it makes no attempt to bait and switch its emotional payload, presenting it in the full, intimate, horrifying detail. Their father away at war and their mother dead as a result of a more recent attack, they end up staying with their aunt. However, when interpersonal conflicts arise out of her harsh, critical attitude, he decides that they can make it on their own and sets out with Setsuko. Following this is a steady decline to what we know will come. He grows desperate, resorting to theft for what little food he can get, but in the end his sister dies of malnourishment, and he too soon loses the will to go on any longer. We part on their spirits rejoined, in parallel to the opening of the film, and then the credits roll. The film is infamous for being the greatest film you'll never want to watch again, and understandably so, even if that statement doesn't resonate with me in particular. Across its entire runtime is this tangible sense of dread. You know exactly what will happen, and all you can do is sit and wait. It's not as if the film is entirely lacking in moments of levity either. The bulk of its runtime is spent on the rather amicable relationship between the siblings, but that impending fate looms over it all like a dark storm cloud. It is a tragedy in the most classic sense of the word, our noble but brash lead brought down by circumstance and a fatal flaw. That tragedy, and the nuance behind it, is precisely what I found to be so impactful when I first watched it. In retrospect, one could make the gripe that there isn't too much to the film beyond that, but nonetheless, it was exactly the type of story I needed at the time. That commitment to telling this meaningful, simple, but subtly complex tale. Due largely, as far as I know, to how we are raised and how our minds develop, it's pretty much a matter-of-fact statement to say kids and even teens are by and large pretty self-consumed. For most, even if the world doesn't revolve around you in the same sense as infancy, you still have your needs met and some sense that others are more invested in yourself than even you are. You really can just go through the motions. There's no need to care about news, politics, people, anything really. At least for me there wasn't. As we grow though, this focus on the self is torn apart bit by bit. You need to get a job, pay taxes, get a girlfriend, start a family. Suddenly there's a seemingly infinite number of things outside of yourself that affect you and require your attention. Suddenly, it matters what your opinion is, and you need to know what is going on in the world around you. Far too rarely, though, does that new ocean of knowledge come with an added dose of empathy. In its depiction of a cold society preoccupied with the self, that is exactly what Grave of the Fireflies asks of us. Every character has their purpose, their own needs, their own stake in the game, and all their actions make sense. Everything they do can be related to, empathized with. Seita and Setsuko's aunt, whom many would chalk up as being the one at fault for their deaths, cannot be so simply ascribed with the blame. Certainly, her complaining attitude is immature and cruel, yet even as a teenager with a less nuanced perspective, I understood that it wasn't nearly that simple. She is stuck in an intensely stressful situation and now must also care for 2 children who are not working on top of the needs of her own family. And she does do so, even if some griping comes with it. It is often Seita exacerbating the situation that brings the issues to tangibly detrimental levels. When Seita finally decides enough is enough and naively ventures out with Setsuko to make it on their own, it is a surprise to the aunt, and she watches them part dumbfounded with only a brief word of farewell. It wouldn't be too much of a stretch, I think, to say she thought something in the vein of, "Oh, they'll be back," and at the lack of such return assumed that they had found some success in their solo venture. After all, she's already got plenty to worry about. To take out one's stress unfairly on an innocent party, well, I think most people can relate to that. It's incredibly easy to make a biting comment totally unwarranted but spurred on by other issues with our one-track minds. When something is really eating at us, it affects all our other interactions. The difficult part is acknowledging and accepting one's own fault. The hardest, apologizing. The actions of any individual are never so simple that it is impossible to just say, "It's your fault." The events of this tragedy instead a product of many mistakes, misunderstandings, and poor choices. Ultimately, it is that lack of understanding, empathy, and humility that dooms the children to their fate. It is the entire structure of this miniature mirror of society that is the root behind it. And this, Grave of the Fireflies, is determined to depict with all the raw details. Rather than to see each event from one person's perspective, we get the omniscient perspective of spirits looking back at the past from an elevated position, free from the inherent limitations in physicality and understanding of the physical world. Grave of the Fireflies was the film that made me think about the people around me. If you'll pardon the goofy phrasing, it opened the metaphorical 1-mile rental shoe store in my heart. Intellectually, I understood that there's infinitely more going on in someone's life and mind than the surface would tell you. But the brilliant thing about art is that it doesn't make you understand it. Art makes you feel it, and that's truly powerful. The film helped me in the discovery of a far more empathetic mindset, to take a second and think that behind every face is so much more. That this world is a product of rapidly shifting variables, billions of stories being unfolded simultaneously. It helped me immensely with understanding others and managing relationships. And while on a broad scale it may be far too much to feel for all at once, if we all did a little bit, wouldn't the world be better off? Paired with that perception of others comes, too, an increased self-awareness. If you can't boil things down to black and white, or even just a limited palette, when the full spectrum's before you, then you have to acknowledge the faults of yourself. I saw Seta, an individual not all that distant from my own age at the time, fall so far because of something as foolish as pride. Letting it get to the point where giving up, asking for help, and swallowing that pride didn't even seem an option. It got me to take a step back from myself. I was a teenager after all, angry and capricious, and on self-reflection I found my frequent behavior without justification. The expression of stresses, growing pains, and childhood espers. I was never that bad as far as I see it, but Grave of the Fireflies definitely aided in my ever-present self-aware perception. I'm far more devoted to appreciating this short life, to understanding others, and to understanding myself. Fireflies may die young, but don't let them be no more than a flash in the pan. And, at least, have the decency to ask, why? Hi, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like and sharing it around. It would be greatly appreciated. Special thank you to my patrons, in particular Talon and Frogus, and if you would like to be a patron, you can do so with the link in the description. Over here is a video that you might enjoy. Over here will be part 2 when it comes out. It's already written, I just need to make it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.